Hello there, my sleepy knights. Tonight, we have a collection of night tales. In the age-old realm of ancient Britain, enveloped by the mystic veils of legend and the silent whispers of forgotten deities, stood a radiant beacon of enlightenment and hope amidst the encroaching shadows of an untamed world. This was Camelot, the illustrious citadel of King Arthur and his esteemed knights of the Round Table, emerging as a fortress of chivalry, justice, and honor in an era overwhelmed by turmoil and discord. With its storied walls, the realm's most valiant and righteous warriors convened, their souls bound by the lofty principles of the Round Table. Their blades were forever unsheathed in the service of protecting the defenseless and extinguishing the forces of malevolence, embodying the highest ideals of knighthood and gallantry. Amid the pantheon of legendary knights, Sir Gawain stood out, not just for his valor, but his striking appearance, which mirrored the noble spirit within. The nephew of the Grand King Arthur, he was a figure of imposing stature, with broad shoulders that bore the weight of his responsibilities gracefully. His hair, as golden as the dawns that graced Camelot's spires, fell in waves around a face marked by a steadfast gaze and a jaw set in determination. His eyes, a deep green, reflected the verdant lands he vowed to protect, and sparkled with a wisdom and kindness that underscored his every deed. Gawain's armor was a testament to his status and skill. Ornately crafted and inlaid with symbols of the ancient and mystical, each piece telling tales of battles won and oaths kept. It gleamed not just from meticulous care, but from the inner light of his honor and purity. At his side hung a sword, not merely a weapon, but a symbol of his commitment to justice and protection. This blade, forged in the fires of righteousness, had tasted the darkness of many battles, yet it shone brightly, as untarnished as Gawain's vow to stand as a bulwark against the encroaching shadows that threatened to cast Britain into perpetual night. Yet, within the resplendent halls of Camelot, adorned with gleaming tapestries and the glow of torchlight, shadows crept, and hidden perils bided their time, eager to challenge the courage of the noblest champions. On a particularly frigid winter's eve, while the court indulged in the joyous celebration and festive warmth of the Christmas feast, an unforeseen guest emerged, piercing the tranquility of the enchanted domain. This stranger, cloaked in mystery and bearing the weight of untold intentions, arrived as the laughter echoed and the firelight danced, setting the stage for a tale of valor and trial that would etch itself into the annals of legend. The majestic doors of the great hall swung open with a thunderous crash, heralding the entrance of a figure, an imposing spectacle, draped entirely in verdant green, from the crown of his head to the soles of his feet. This colossal being, a titan among men, loomed over the assembly, his stature dwarfing even the most formidable of the knights. His eyes, alight with a spectral gleam, pierced through the revelry, casting a chill that threaded its way through the hearts of all the onlookers. And clasped within his grasp was a branch of holly, its dark, lush leaves whispering tales of ancient shadowed groves, while his other hand wielded a formidable battle axe. The weapon's blade, sharpened to the deadly precision of a whisper-thin edge, glinted ominously in the flickering torchlight. I come seeking the bravest and boldest of King Arthur's knights, boomed the voice of the Green Knight, his declaration echoing through the hall with a force that vibrated the timbered rafters overhead. Who among you possesses the courage to face my challenge and demonstrate your valor? The assembled knights, cloaked in the prestige and honour of the Round Table, turned their gaze towards their sovereign, their expressions etched with a mix of apprehension and awe. Yet, King Arthur, the epitome of wisdom and justice, ascended from his regal seat, his demeanour composed, his gaze unwavering as he met the eyes of the verdant intruder. Before any among my fellowship ventures to accept your gauntlet, Arthur responded, his tone imbued with the calm authority of a seasoned monarch, we would hear the terms of this test. Speak without guile, Sir Knight, that we may ascertain the true measure of your proposition. The Green Knight's lips twisted into a grin, both mocking and sinister, as he unfolded the terms of his eerie proposition. A mere trifle. I jest for the Yuletide, he proclaimed, his voice laden with scorn. Let one among you deliver unto me a single stroke with my own axe. In a year's time, that very champion shall seek me at the Green Chapel, there to receive an identical stroke in exchange. A wave of disquiet swept through the knights, their unease palpable in the air. They were no strangers to the clash of battle, to the exchange of blows born of conflict and enmity. Yet the notion of striking a pact that entailed willingly submitting to the edge of a foe's weapon struck them as a grave folly, a venture into unknown pearls. Amidst this brewing storm of doubt and deliberation, Sir Gawain rose, his spirit aflame with valour and his commitment to honour steadfast. Laying his hand upon the sword that had served as his companion in many a noble deed, he stepped forth from the ranks. I shall rise to this challenge, he announced, his declaration resounding with firm resolve. I am Sir Gawain, of Arthur's esteemed Round Table, and no creature, be it a man of green or otherwise, shall sway my heart with fear. The Green Knight's gaze sparkled with malevolent delight as he extended his massive axe to Gawain, the instrument chilling and weighty in the young knight's hold. With the resolve steeling his heart, Gawain adjusted his grip. The gravity of his impending act pressing down upon him like the hand of fate. And in one fluid motion, he swung the axe, its blade slicing through the air and into the Green Knight's neck. Severing bone with a gruesome resonance that echoed through the hall. An audible gasp of horror swept through the onlookers as the Green Knight's head plummeted to the cold flagstones. A gush of unearthly green blood marring the floor. Yet, as a collective shudder passed through the crowd, the knight's body remained eerily upright, a spectacle that drew a mixture of fascination and revulsion. Then, in a turn of events that sent waves of dread rippling through the assembly, the decapitated head began to speak, its voice a bubbling echo from beyond. Your blow was true, Sir Gawain, the head intoned. its tone a chilling reminder of the pact sealed. Bear in mind your vow. A year hence, you must find me at the Green Chapel and present yourself to my axe, as I have stood before you this eve. With these words lingering in the charged silence, the Green Knight's torso stooped, retrieving its head with an unsettling grace. Then, with measured steps that resonated against the stone, he departed the hall, leaving behind a veil of stunned quiet as the reality of Gawain's bold commitment began to sink into the hearts of all present. As the wheel of the year spun by, weaving through the tapestry of seasons, the echo of that haunting night remained steadfast in Gawain's mind. The Green Knight's challenge loomed ominously, a spectre of dread that shadowed every moment, growing ever more oppressive as the day of reckoning neared. Resigned to the inescapable path laid before him, Sir Gawain was engulfed by a solemn resolve. With a heart burdened by the weight of impending fate, he clad himself in his armor, each piece a cold reflection of the dim winter dawn. The metal, polished to a mute shine, seemed to whisper of the grave task ahead. He offered his farewells to the brethren of the Round Table, to King Arthur and Queen Guinevere, and to the nobleman whose grace had always been a beacon in the darkest of times. Within him, a quiet acceptance took root, the painful acknowledgement that these partings might herald the end of all he held dear. Mounting his steed, Gawain set forth from the gates of Camelot, the chill wind tugging at his cloak, the ground beneath them hard and unforgiving with frost. Each step away from the castle felt like a further burden upon his spirit. Yet, his determination remained unshaken. His promise was his bond, an oath that he would uphold at any cost. Guided by honor and the unyielding force of his vow, Gawain ventured into the unknown, prepared to face whatever end his quest might bring. For days and nights uncounted, Gawain travelled through the wild lands of Britain, his path taking him over windswept moors and through tangled forests, past crumbling ruins and ancient standing stones that seemed to whisper of long-forgotten secrets. He faced many dangers on his journey. Prowling wolves and hulking giants, treacherous bogs and icy rivers. But always he pressed on, his resolve unwavering. Upon the approach of year's end and the deep chill of the winter solstice, Sir Gawain reached the threshold of a formidable castle, its walls aglow as though cast from the very lustre of the sun. Here, within these radiant battlements, he was embraced with the warmth of kinship by the castle's lord, a figure of noble grace and generous heart named Bertilac de Hautesir. "Welcome, Sir Gawain," greeted Lord Bertilac, his firm grasp a testament to a warrior's camaraderie. "The road has wearied you, no doubt. Stay your journey here, amongst friends. Let us indulge you in the mirth of feasting, for it is well known the path that lies ahead is fraught with peril and uncertainty. Compelled by the sincerity of Bertilac's invitation, Gawain found himself momentarily setting aside the looming spectre of his quest. The promise of respite and fellowship in the warm embrace of the castle's hall was just too sweet a solace to forsake. And so, in the span of 3 days, Gawain partook in a revelry that seemed to suspend time itself, his heart and laughter intertwining with those of Lord Bertilac and his glorious court. The Lord's wife, the enchanting Lady Bertilac, with her beauty that could eclipse the moon and charm that could sway the sternest heart, became a figure of fascination for Gawain. Her allure tested the mettle of his chivalry, tempting him to stray from the path of virtue. As the dawn of the 4th day painted the sky with hues of promise, Lord Bertilac, bound for the hunt, proposed a light-hearted accord. "Let us entertain a pact, Sir Gawain," he suggested, mischief dancing in his gaze. "The bounty of my hunt shall be yours, and in kind you shall grant me whatever fortune graces you under my roof." With the spirit of the festivities yet lingering like a sweet intoxication, Gawain consented to the pact, little foreseeing the complexities it would weave into the fabric of his stay. As the hours waned and Lady Bertilac sought his company, her gaze laden with unspoken desires, Gawain perceived the intricacies of the web in which he was ensnared. "Valiant Gawain," she entreated, her touch a whisper against his skin. "A knight of your stature must surely harbour tales of loves both lost and won. Would you not share with me the secrets that stir your heart?" In the face of temptation, Gawain held fast to the tenets of his knighthood, gently rebuffing her advances. "My lady," he responded, "I am but a humble servant of the Round Table, sworn to uphold the virtues of chivalry and fidelity. I must not, cannot, forsake the trust of your lord husband, nor the sacred oaths that bind me." Yet, Lady Bertilac's pursuit was relentless, her seductions a test of Gawain's resolve. Leaving him to navigate the precarious balance between honour and desire, his spirit embattled by the duality of his duties and the depths of his temptation. On the third day, as he prepared to depart, Lady Bertilac came to him one last time, bearing a gift. "Take this, Sir Gawain," she said, pressing a girdle of green silk into his hands. "It is an enchanted token, woven with spells of protection. Wear it against your skin, and no blade nor blow shall have the power to harm you." Gawain hesitated, torn between his desire for the lady's favour and his sense of honour. But in the end, the thought of the Green Knight's axe and the doom that awaited him proved too much to bear. He accepted the girdle, draping it about his waist and concealing it beneath his armour, a talisman against the fate he feared. And so, with a heavy heart and a troubled mind, Gawain rode out from Lord Bertilac's castle, the green girdle hidden beneath his surcoat. He knew that by keeping the girdle and not presenting it to Lord Bertilac as part of their pact, he had betrayed his host's trust and his own honour. Yet, the fear of death was a powerful force, one that could sway even the bravest of knights. As he rode through the barren countryside, the wind howling about him like a legion of lost souls, Gawain's thoughts turned ever darker. He had been tested, as all knights must be, but he had been found wanting. The Green Knight's challenge had exposed the cracks in his armor, the weakness that lay beneath his shining facade of knightly virtue. But even as despair threatened to overwhelm him, Gawain clung to the hope that redemption might still be within his grasp. He had failed, yes, but he had not fallen. He had stumbled, but he had not surrendered. And so, with grim determination, he pressed on towards the Green Chapel and the fate that awaited him there. At last, as the sun sank low on the horizon, and the shadows lengthened into a cloak of darkness, Gawain came to the Green Chapel. It was an eerie place, a jagged wound in the earth that seemed to throb with an unholy energy. The very stones seemed to whisper of ancient evils and long-forgotten curses, and the air was thick with the stench of decay. And there, waiting in the shadows, stood the Green Knight. His emerald armor glinting in the fading light, his axe held loosely at his side. He grinned as Gawain approached, a smile that held no warmth or mirth. "Welcome, Sir Gawain," he said, his voice a rasping whisper that seemed to come from the very depths of the earth. "I see you have not forgotten our bargain. Come, let us settle our debt." Gawain dismounted, his legs trembling beneath him as he faced his foe. He knew that he should be afraid, that he should beg for mercy or flee in terror. But something in him, some last shred of knightly pride, would not allow him to yield. And so, with a deep breath and a silent prayer, Gawain sank to his knees before the Green Knight. Baring his neck to the blade. He closed his eyes, waiting for the blow that would end his life and his shame. But the blow did not come. Instead, he felt the cold kiss of steel against his skin. A feather-light touch that traced the line of his throat without breaking the surface. Once, twice, thrice the axe descended, each time stopping just short of its mark, until at last Gawain opened his eyes in confusion. "What game is this?" he demanded, his voice rough with fear and anger. "If you mean to kill me, then do it and be done. But do not mock me with false mercy." The Green Knight threw back his head and laughed, a sound that echoed through the chapel like the tolling of a funeral bell. "Ah, Gawain," he said, "you have proven yourself true in all things save one. You kept your word and came to face me, even though you knew it might mean your certain death. That takes a rare courage, and for that I commend you. But," he continued, his tone hardening, "you also betrayed the trust of your host and accepted a token meant to protect you from harm. That was a coward's choice, and it stains the honor you hold so dear." Gawain felt the weight of the Green Knight's words like a physical blow, and he bowed his head in shame. "You are right," he said, his voice a hoarse whisper. "I have failed in my duty as a knight, and I am not worthy of the title I bear. Do with me as you will, Green Knight, for now my life is forfeit." But the Green Knight merely shook his head, a strange smile playing about his lips. "Your life, Sir Gawain, is not mine to take," he said, "for I am not what I seem." And with those words, the Green Knight's form shimmered and changed, his emerald armor melting away to reveal the familiar face of Lord Bertilac. "I am the lord of the castle where you stayed," he said, "and the Green Knight was but a guise, a test of your mettle and your honor." Gawain stared at him in astonishment, his mind reeling with revelation. But why?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Why put me through such a trial?" "Because, Sir Gawain," Lord Bertilac said, The world is a dark and dangerous place, and the Knights of the Round Table are the light that holds back the shadows. But even the brightest light can be dimmed by doubt and temptation. And it is only by facing our weaknesses that we can truly become strong. He reached out and clasped Gawain's shoulder, his grip firm but not unkind. "You have learned a valuable lesson here, my friend. Honor is not a shining armor that we don once and never remove. It is a choice we make, day by day, moment by moment, to be true to ourselves and to those we serve. It is a constant struggle, and one that we will not always win. But it is in the striving that we find our true worth. Gawain felt the truth of Lord Bertilac's words sink deep into his heart, and he knew that he would carry them with him for the rest of his days. He rose to his feet, the green girdle still wrapped about his waist, and bowed deeply to the man who had been his host and his foe. Thank you, my lord," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I will not forget the lesson you have taught me, nor the mercy you have shown. I will strive to be a better knight and a better man for having known you." And with that, Gawain mounted his horse, and he rode out from the Green Chapel. The weight of his shame and his newfound wisdom heavy upon his shoulders, He knew that he would never be the same, that the Gawain who had left Camelot would not be the same man who now returned. But he also knew that he was not alone. The Knights of the Round Table, his brothers in arms, would stand with him, and together they would face the darkness that threatened to engulf their land. They would be the light in the shadows, the hope in the midst of despair. And though they might stumble and fall along the way, they would always rise again, stronger and truer than before. And so Gawain rode on, the green girdle fluttering in the wind, a symbol of his failure and his redemption. And he rode towards Camelot, towards his king, towards his fellow knights, towards the destiny that awaited him. And though the road ahead was long, and the dangers many, he knew that he would face them with courage and honor. For he was a Knight of the Round Table. And that was a brotherhood that could never be broken. Night again. Should have gathered some wood earlier. Damned leg. Always worse when the weather turns. Let's see here. Half a loaf. Bit of cheese. Enough for tonight. What else? I need to check my snares come morning. If the rain hasn't drowned the rabbits first. The north wind howls across the moor, like souls in torment seeking shore. No, that's not right. The north wind howls across the heath, like warriors crying past their death. Yes, that's better. Not good, but better, I suppose. At least the rain stopped. I might get some sleep after all tonight. Someone's coming. At this hour? In this weather? Hello? Is someone in there? I saw the firelight in the road. Aye, traveller.
There's a fire, if you need it. And shelter from the wind.
Thank you. I didn't expect to find anyone out here.
Not many pass this way. Cave keeps the rain off, at least.
You're alone here.
Yeah, just me. Whatever travelers happen by. Sit, if you like. There's a fire. Not much, but it's warm.
You live in this cave?
For a time, I move with the seasons. Winter's coming, so I'll head to the valley soon.
Your leg?
It's an old wound. Healed poorly. Makes traveling harder than it once was.
I'm Sir Roland of Eastmark.
No need for titles here, Sir Knight. We're just two men beside a fire. Your armor's seen better days.
Yeah. As have I.
There's water in that skin if you're thirsty. And bread in the sack, though it's a day old.
Thank you.
So, what brings a knight to these woods? This old road's been abandoned for years.
I was, returning from battle. At Raven's Gorge.
I've heard no news from that direction.
And you won't. There were no survivors to tell the tale. Except me.
I see. No, you don't.
My company are gone. 50 good men. Lord Morwen's forces, they knew we were coming. I don't know how, but they knew. Pass was narrow. The archers on the ridge. I never stood a chance.
And you escaped?
I fled. When our captain fell, I ordered retreat. But it was too late. We were surrounded. The men, they looked to me and I couldn't. I couldn't. I rode through the lines when a fog rolled in. Pure luck or cowardice rewarded.
Would your death have saved them?
I should have died with them. A knight doesn't abandon his men.
Well, yet here you sit.
What do you do here, old man? Besides offering shelter to disgraced knights.
I collect tales, stories from travelers, songs from distant lands. I remember them. Well, you won't want mine. Every story has its worth. I can't close my eyes without seeing them, without seeing their faces, their eyes as they realised they were trapped. Tell me one of your stories, something to push these ghosts away, just for tonight. What kind of tale would you hear? Anything, just anything to take my mind off it, please. Please. Well, I know a tale from the Eastern Kingdoms about a labyrinth and the shadows within it. Go on then. Well, long ago, in a kingdom whose name is now forgotten, it was said there ruled a queen who was as wise as she was fair. Her land prospered, but austerity draws unwanted attention. Always does. So from the northern mountains came a sorcerer who envied all this queen had built. You see, 3 times she offered him a place at her court if he would share his knowledge. 3 times he refused. Mercy to enemies is folly. Perhaps, yes. And it's said that after the 3rd refusal, the sorcerer revealed his true intent. With dark magic, he created a labyrinth in the very heart of this kingdom. And within this labyrinth dwelled a creature of shadow, a creature, a monster that was said to feed on fear itself. Go on then. Each season, the sorcerer decreed, 7 of your people must enter this labyrinth. None shall return. This will continue until your kingdom knows the same despair that has been my companion. Why not just hunt down this sorcerer? Cut his head off and be done with it. Yeah. Many tried. All failed, of course. The sorcerer had bound his life to the labyrinth itself. Only by defeating what lurked within could his curse be broken. All right then. And so it was said that for 3 years, 21 souls entered the darkness each year. None returned. The Queen soldiers searched the labyrinth, of course, finding only empty corridors. No bodies, no blood, just silence and darkness. And then hope began to wither throughout the land. Fields went untended as farmers feared being chosen next. Markets emptied as merchants traveled elsewhere. Even the palace grew quiet, its festivals and music silenced by grief.
Some people always give up too quickly.
Do they? 3 years is a long time to watch your neighbors disappear. Then, in a small village on the kingdom's edge, lived a shepherd named Arian. Now, Arian, he tended his flock alone on the hillsides, keeping to himself mostly. Few knew his story, how his younger sister had been taken the previous year.
And he carried that guilt with him, I bet.
Yes, like a stone around his neck. Each night he dreamt of her face as the guards led her away to the labyrinth. Each morning he woke believing he had failed her.
Let me guess. He volunteers to go to the labyrinth.
He did. When the Queen's messengers came to the village square for the next choosing, drawing names from an iron urn, Arian pushed through the crowd. He stepped forward before they could call another name.
Why would he do that? Sounds like a fool's errand. Bloody death wish.
Well, the Queen herself came forward, you see, asking the same very question you just had. Why volunteer for certain death, shepherd? Arian looked her dead in the eye and said, because death is not certain until it comes, your majesty. And while there's life, there's hope.
Pretty words, I guess, but still foolish.
The crowd thought so too. They whispered behind their hands. They whispered that grief had addled his mind, that guilt had driven him to suicide. But Arian stood firm. My sister went into that darkness, he told the Queen. And if there's even the slightest chance that she lives, I must try to find her.
And if she was already dead?
Then I'll avenge her, he said. Or join her. Either way, I'll no longer wake each morning with this weight upon my soul. That's what he said.
I understand that feeling.
He believed strongly his sister might still be alive somewhere in the darkness. Love makes fools of most men at some point.
Suppose it does. I've seen men do far more dangerous things for far less worthy reasons.
That night, before Arian was to enter the labyrinth, an old woman knocked on his door. she gave him a simple crystal pendant. "This stone reveals the truth," she told him. "In darkness it grows brightest. When facing your greatest fears, follow its light, and you may yet survive." A magic trinket to save the day. The next morning, as dawn broke cold and grey, Arian and 6 others stood before the labyrinth's entrance. This structure rose from the earth like a wound in the landscape. Black stone walls, stretching higher than the tallest trees. No windows at all, only a single massive doorway, sealed with iron-banded doors. The Queen's Guard formed a circle around them, not to prevent escape. None had ever tried to flee their fate, but as a final honor. And the captain stepped forward and read the proclamation. It said, "By decree of the sorcerer Morden, these 7 souls enter the labyrinth as tribute. May the gods receive them with mercy." And bloody empty words for the condemned. 6 others, an aging merchant, twin sisters from the northern villages, scholar, a blacksmith's son, and a young mother whose infant had been given to her sister's care. They all wept or prayed, but Arian stood silent, eyes fixed on the doors, pendant clutched in his fist. And the massive doors swung open, the groan of ancient hinges. Beyond lay only darkness, a blackness so completed it seemed to swallow the morning light. His companions hesitated, clinging to one another. Arian, gripping the pendant, was first to step inside. When the doors sealed behind them, the boom that echoed through the corridors, panic scattered. The merchant ran blindly to the right, the sisters fled straight ahead. The scholar collapsed. The blacksmith's son tried to drag him up. The young mother stood frozen, tears streaming down her face. And so what did Arian do? He called to them, trying to urge calm. But his voice was swallowed by darkness. One by one, they disappeared into different passages, till Arian stood alone at the entrance. And he lifted up the pendant, expecting the promised light, you see. But it remained dark as obsidian against his palm.
Deceived by an old woman. Typical. I've been there before.
Rian pressed on, regardless. At the first crossing of paths, he heard what sounded like his sister, crying from the left passage. He hurried toward the sound, but found instead a memory made real. It was the day he failed to save a village child from drowning. It was the dripping ghost that stood beside him, eyes accusing.
Wait a minute. The labyrinth showed him his own memories.
Yes. His deepest fears. And he stood frozen. It was just then he noticed the pendant had begun to glow. Faintly, but it was there. This child approached, reaching for him.
What did he do?
He ran. Each new passage brought new terrors. Bottomless pit. The burning of his village, while he watched on helpless. With each horror he noticed something strange. The pendant grew darker, not brighter, contrary to the old woman's promise.
So, wait a minute. The pendant was worthless.
After hours of wandering, haunted at every turn, Rian's strength began to fail. At yet another junction of endless black corridors, he slumped against the wall, legs no longer able to carry him. His throat was raw from calling out his sister's name. Hands all bloodied from feeling along the rough walls. I cannot defeat my fears, he whispered into the darkness. They are too many, too strong. I was a fool to think that I could save her.
At least he recognized the truth of it. Better to face reality than cling to false hope.
The pendant lay cold and dark in his palm. Useless. Another false promise in a life full of them. Nearly threw it away in anger. But something stopped him. A memory of the old woman's eyes. The certainty in her voice when she spoke truth.
So what happened?
Well, as he sat there, mind drifting between exhaustion and despair, a thought came to him. You see, the pendant behaved opposite to the old woman's promise, darkening near his fears instead of brightening. What if her words held a different meaning? What if facing your fears meant not confronting them, but accepting them?
What? Accept defeat? Surrender to fear?
Not surrender. Oh, no. Simply acknowledgement. Recognition that fear exists, not as an enemy to be vanquished, but as a part of ourselves to be understood.
Accept his fears? Well, what good would that do?
Arian took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and he thought of the drowned child, and he whispered, "I failed you. I was not fast enough, not strong enough. I carry that failure with me." And just then, the pendant began to glow. Just slightly. Encouraged, Arian continued through the labyrinth. But now, instead of fleeing from his horrors, he acknowledged each one. "Yes," he said, "I fear the depths. I fear the fire. I fear being powerless."
And what? And this helped him somehow?
With each fear, he accepted. The pendant grew brighter. It lit his way deeper into the labyrinth, till he reached the very center. There waited the shadow beast. It was a creature of swirling darkness with countless eyes. It had no fixed form. It shifted and flowed like smoke, taking shapes from Arian's own mind.
And how could he possibly defeat such a thing?
The beast lunged at him, and Arian raised the now bright pendant before him. But instead of attacking, he lowered his hand and he said, "I see you. I know what you are. You are fear itself. My fear, made manifest. And I accept that you are part of me."
He surrendered to it.
Not surrender. Acceptance. The shadow beast howled and charged, but as it touched Arian, something unexpected happened. Instead of consuming him, it began to shrink. With each fear Arian named and accepted, the beast grew smaller, until it was no larger than a house cat skulking at his feet.
This makes no sense. Fear doesn't simply shrink away because you acknowledge it.
Doesn't it? The greatest power fear holds over us is the terror of what might be. By accepting what he feared, Arian stripped the beast of its weapon.
Right. So what happened then?
What happened is the walls of the labyrinth began to crumble. Light poured in from above. Arian found himself standing in an open field, surrounded by all the missing villagers, all alive, including his sister. The sorcerer's curse was broken.
And the sorcerer?
He was found dead in his mountain lair, withered away when his creation was defeated.
Well, it's a neat ending. Too neat for real life.
Perhaps. It's only a story.
I thought you were going to tell me a story about slaying monsters with magical swords.
Well, I know tales like that too, would you? Do you prefer one of those instead?
No. Tell me another one. If you know any others.
I do know a tale about a great warrior and his broken sword. If that interests you.
It does? Yeah.
All right. Let's see if I can remember. There once lived a legendary warrior named Caden. Now, Caden wielded a sword called the Blade of Dawn, and in 100 battles, he had never known defeat. His fame, well, it spread across 7 kingdoms.
Until one day, I assume.
Until one day, indeed. You see, Caden grew prideful. He began to believe it was his sword that made him invincible, not his skill or his purpose. In the greatest battle of his life against an enemy who threatened his homeland, something unexpected happened.
Did his sword break?
Yes. Against a seemingly weaker opponent. The Blade of Dawn shattered like glass. Caden, for the first time, felt so afraid. He fled the battlefield, leaving his men to continue the fight without him.
A coward, then.
It was said for months, Caden wandered the wilderness. He wandered haunted by his failure. And then one night, lost in a storm, he stumbled upon a small hut. And in this hut was an old smith who worked his forge despite the late hour.
Let me guess, another magical stranger appears with convenient wisdom.
Now the smith offered Caden shelter. When he recognized the warrior, he asked to see the remnants of this famous blade. Caden showed him the broken hilt he still carried.
Could this smith remake it?
Well, the smith said, I can forge you a new blade, but it will not be the same. He said, your sword broke because you forgot what you were fighting for. A blade with no purpose shatters against even the weakest conviction.
That's ridiculous. Steel doesn't care about purpose.
The smith required 3 elements to forge a new blade. Water from the pool of reflection, fire from the mountain of ancestors, and earth from the fields of tomorrow. Caden's first journey took him to the pool of reflection. It was a still mountain lake, so clear it mirrored the sky perfectly. Now, the smith had instructed him to look into the water and collect what he found there.
And what did he see?
Himself, not as a great warrior, but as the frightened little boy who had first taken up a sword to protect his younger siblings after their parents died.
He saw his true self.
In the reflection, he watched his own journey. How protecting his family had grown into protecting his village, then his kingdom. How somewhere along the way, glory had replaced protection as his goal.
That's true, that happens to many men.
And it was then that Caden wept at what he'd become. And his tears fell into the pool. And when he collected the water in his flask, it glowed with a soft inner light. His second journey took him to the mountains of ancestors, where it was said ancient warriors were buried. At its peak burned an eternal flame. When Caden reached it, the flames parted, and he saw visions. Visions of those who had died following him into battle.
His fallen comrades.
Yes. They spoke to him not with blame, but with questions. What were we fighting for, Caden? Why did we die? he had no answer for them. He had led them into battle for his own glory, not for the greater purpose.
That's the worst of it. When they look to you for answers and you have none.
Caden knelt before these spirits until he found the words, and he said, I failed you. I led with pride instead of purpose. But I will make it right. When he collected fire in his torch, it burned blue and cold.
And the third trial? The fields of tomorrow?
The fields of tomorrow. A vast plain where it was said one could see glimpses of what might be. When Caden arrived, he saw only an empty field of tall grass. He was disappointed, and so he sat and he waited. As the sun set, the winds picked up, and in their whisper, he heard voices. Children playing, people working, life's continuing in peace.
I don't understand.
You see, these were the voices of those who would live if Caden returned to the battle. If he protected them as he had once protected his siblings. The future that would never exist if he remained in exile. When he gathered soil from the field, it felt warm in his hands.
So, the sword's strength came from his heart all along. Sounds like a child's tale. Smith's forged steel, not sentiment.
Is that so? Tell me, Sir Knight. Have you never fought harder for something you believed in? Pressed on despite wounds that should have failed you because something mattered more than pain?
That's different, that's determination. Willpower.
And what forges willpower, if not purpose? What tempers determination, if not meaning?
You twist words like a court poet. Sword is steel, nothing more.
If that were true, any farmer with a sharp blade could be a knight. Yet, they are not. Why?
Training, discipline, years of practice.
All shaping the hand that holds the sword. Just as purpose shapes the heart behind the hand.
Perhaps there's some truth in that, then.
When Caden returned to the smith, the old man worked through 3 days and 3 nights. He melted down what remained of the Blade of Dawn, mixing it with new ore mined from the mountains. As he worked, he added the water fire and earth Caden had gathered, binding them into the metal with ancient words and hammer blows.
What did the new sword look like?
It was plainer than the Blade of Dawn. No gold inlay, no jeweled hilt. Just steel with a faint blue tint, a leather-wrapped grip, and a guard simple enough for a common soldier. Yet, when Caden held it, the blade seemed to hum, something that wasn't quite sound, but rather feeling.
What did Caden see in the fields of tomorrow that gave him such courage?
The faces of those who depended on him. Not glory or legend, but simple protection. The ordinary lives that could continue only if he remembered why he first took up a sword.
Right. And did he return to battle?
He did. He found his army still fighting, though pushed back to the walls of their homeland. They had not given up despite his desertion. When they saw him return, some cheered, others cursed, but all made way as he approached the enemy commander.
And then?
The battle was fierce. Caden's new blade was not magical, but his purpose was unbreakable. He fought not for glory, but for the future he had glimpsed. And though he took many wounds, he prevailed. The enemy was driven back.
So, he won after all.
In a manner of speaking, yes, Caden never regained his former fame. Some still called him a coward for his earlier flight. But the land knew peace for many years, and the children in the fields of tomorrow grew up without knowing war. Caden considered this greater victory than any he had won before.
This Caden sounds like a fool, just as I was.
Most men are fools at some point in their lives. The wise ones learn from it.
It'll be dawn soon.
Will you continue your journey home?
No. I'm going back.
Back?
To Lord Morwen's forces. They'll be camped at Blackwater Crossing by now, preparing to march on the capital. They don't know I escaped. They don't know someone carries a warning.
One man against an army?
Not to fight them. To delay them. The mountain pass narrows at Raven's Rock. A single rider could trigger a rock slide. It would buy the capital time to prepare for defences.
You might not survive.
I know.
I don't know who you are, old man, but your tales have a strange power.
Just stories.
No. They're more than that. I've been running from shadows. The night is made for more than fleeing.
What are you made for, Sir Roland?
Protection. Not glory or legend. Just standing between harm and those who cannot fight. I won't make it back in time, will I?
To save everyone? Probably not.
But I might save some.
That would be something. Something worth doing.
When I was a boy, I always wanted to be a knight. Because of the stories. Glory and honor. And I thought it would be so different.
It never is.
Were you a soldier once? You speak like a man who's seen battle.
Long ago. Different war, same story.
What happened to your leg?
It was an arrow. Took me out of the fighting. Perhaps for the best. Your horse needs rest. Another hour would serve you both.
No. No dawn approaches. Morwen's scouts will be checking the passes. I need the advantage of surprise.
Take this, then.
A dagger.
It's good steel. Better than it looks. Sometimes the smaller blade finds its mark when swords cannot.
I can't take your weapon.
You're going to battle. I'm sitting beside a fire telling stories. Which of us needs it more?
I thank you for this. For the fire. For the stories.
There's still goodness worth protecting in this world, Sir Roland. Remember that when your arm grows tired.
I will.
May your blade stay sharp and your heart sharper still.
If I survive this, I'll return your dagger.
If you survive, I'll tell you the tale of a knight who turned back.
I'd like to hear that one.
Go well, Sir Knight. Go well. Another one will come tomorrow. They always do. The lost ones. The broken ones. The ones who need a tale to find their way. And
now to sleep. And perhaps I'll dream of battles long past, or knights returning home, or perhaps just silence. Silence would be welcome too.
This is one of history's most vivid and personal accounts of the medieval Crusades, written by John Joinville, a French nobleman who accompanied King Louis on the Seventh Crusade to Egypt and the Holy Land between 1248 and 1254. Unlike many medieval chronicles written by monks from second-hand accounts, Joinville was actually there, fighting in battles, suffering from disease, enduring capture. Writing decades later as an old man, he provides an unvarnished look at medieval military life, complete with graphic descriptions, devastating effects, the brutal realities of siege warfare, and the complex relationships between Christians and Muslims. His account is especially valuable because he knew King Louis personally and offers intimate portraits of royal decision-making, the tensions between French nobles, and the crushing financial costs of medieval warfare. This is history told by someone who lived it, making it one of our most authentic windows into the 13th century world. And it goes like this. In the name of Almighty God, I, John, Lord of Joinville, Steward of Champagne, am writing down what I witnessed during the 6 years I spent alongside King Louis on his holy pilgrimage to the east. After we returned home, in 1241, the king held a magnificent court at Saumur in Anjou. I was there, and I can testify it was the most splendid gathering I ever witnessed. Seated beside the king was the Count of Poitiers, whom Louis had recently knighted on St. John's Day. In front of the king's table sat the King of Navarre, dressed in a coat and cloak of rich silk fabric, adorned with a golden belt and clasp. King Louis himself wore a coat of sky blue satin and a cotton cap that, frankly, didn't suit him very well. Throughout the hall, an enormous number of knights were feasting, more than I could count. Many said they had never seen so many gold-embroidered surcoats and garments. There must have been 3,000 knights present. But, by God's will, a terrible illness struck the king. bringing him so close to death that one of his nurses declared him dead and was about to pull the sheet over his face. Another nurse on the opposite side of the bed stopped her. When the king heard the two women arguing, our Lord worked within him and restored his health, for he had been unable to speak. As soon as he could, he asked them to bring him the cross, and they did. When his mother, the queen, heard that his speech had returned, her joy was boundless. But when she learned he had taken the Crusader's vow, she grieved as if he lay dead before her eyes. After the king took the cross, all three of his brothers followed suit, along with many others. So, at Easter, in the year of grace 1248, I summoned my vassals and followers to Zwanville. We feasted and celebrated all week, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. On Friday, I addressed them. I'm going overseas, I said, and I don't know if I'll return. Come forward. If I have wronged any of you, I will make it right and settle any grievances you have against me or my servants. I resolved all matters concerning my estate's affairs. Then I set out with 9 other knights, myself making 10. Soon the wind filled our sails and carried us beyond sight of land. We saw nothing but water and sky, and each day the wind took us farther from the land where we were born. If God had not been constantly at my side, I could never have endured those 6 long years I spent in the Holy Land. When we reached Cyprus, the king was already there. I, who had an annual income of less than £1,000, had taken on the burden of supporting 9 other knights on this overseas venture. When I arrived in Cyprus, after paying for my ship, I had only £120 left. Some of my knights sent word that unless I could find more money, they would abandon me. But God, who never failed me, provided. The king summoned me, retained me in his service, and put £800 into my treasury, giving me more money than I really needed. When March arrived, by the king's command, he and the nobles and other pilgrims loaded their ships with wine and provisions. When everything was properly arranged, the king ordered his nobles to follow him in their ships straight to Egypt. On Saturday, the king set sail, and all the other vessels likewise. A magnificent sight to behold. The entire sea, as far as the eye could see, seemed covered with canvas from the ship's sails. There were reportedly 1,800 vessels, both large and small. On the Thursday, after Pentecost, the king arrived at Damietta and found all the Sultan's forces on the beach. Impressive men to look at, for the Sultan's banners were golden and glittered in the sun. The noise they made with their drums and horns was terrifying to hear. While disembarking his men, a knight belonging to Lord Arar of Brienne, named Plon, tried to get down from the large ship into a small boat, but the boat drifted away, and he fell into the sea and drowned. Returning to my ship, I put into my small boat a squire I had knighted, named Lord Hugh of Vanur, along with 2 brave young knights, Lord V of Veri and Lord William of Dameran. These 2 were bitter enemies, and no one could make peace between them. In Moria, they had actually grabbed each other by the hair, but I made them put aside their hatred and kiss each other, swearing by all that was holy that we wouldn't set foot on land while they remained enemies. We headed for shore and came alongside the king's large ship. His men began shouting at me because I was getting ahead of them, but I paid no attention and landed us facing a large battalion of Turks. About 6,000 mounted men. As soon as they saw us land, they spurred their horses toward us. We planted our shields in the sand point first, and our lances the same way. When the Turks saw they couldn't advance without being impaled, they turned and fled. The Saracens sent word 3 times to the Sultan by carrier pigeon that the king had landed, but received no reply. The Sultan was ill. They concluded he must be dead and abandoned at Damietta. The king sent a knight ahead to scout, and when he confirmed this, the king and all the army's priests sang, giving thanks for the Lord's favor and delivering Damietta into our hands. The Turks made a serious error leaving Damietta without destroying the bridge of boats, which would have caused us great difficulty. So, the king and all of us mounted our horses and rode to camp. It happened that Lord Walter of Otra had armed himself fully in his tent, and mounted, charged out alone against the Turks. Before he reached them, he fell, and his stallion ran into the enemy ranks. Most of the Saracens rode mares, which attracted the horse. 4 Saracens came upon Lord Walter as he lay on the ground and struck him. The Constable of France rescued him, some of the king's sergeants, and carried him back. He couldn't speak. Several surgeons attended him and, judging he wasn't in mortal danger, bled him in both arms. But late that evening, Lord Albert of Nari and I visited him and found that he was dead. When the king was told, he replied that he would regret losing 1,000 men like him, since they would disobey orders he had done. Every night, Saracens would sneak into the camp and kill people they found sleeping. My lord of Courtenay sentry was killed this way. The Sultan paid a golden coin for every Christian head. While the king was there, the great king of the Tartars sent messengers, offering to help him conquer the Holy Land and liberate Jerusalem from the Saracens. The king sent messengers in reply, who were gone 2 years before returning. How they were received, I shall tell you as they told it to me. It's a strange tale, but I won't relate it now. When the Count of Poitiers arrived, the king summoned the nobles to decide whether to march to Alexandria or Cairo. Most of the nobles agreed to go to Alexandria, but the king's brother opposed this, saying that if you want to kill a snake, you must crush its head first, urging the king to march to Cairo. The king ignored his noble's advice and followed his brother. One night, while we were keeping watch over the towers, the Turks brought up a siege engine, filled it with Greek fire, and hurled it at us. Lord Walter of Cool, who was with me, said, "We're in the greatest danger we've ever faced. If they set fire to our shelters, we are lost and burned. But if we abandon our posts, we're disgraced. Only God can save us." He advised that every time they threw fire, we should kneel and pray. The first shot passed between the 2 towers and landed right in front of us. Our firefighters extinguished it, and the Saracens, unable to aim accurately, shot too high, so their fire fell back on themselves. The Greek fire looked like a dragon flying through the air, casting such bright light that you could see all over the camp as if it were daylight. That night, they hurled Greek fire at us 3 times. The next day, their siege engines found their target, and 2 of our towers burned. The King of Sicily wanted to rush into the flames to put them out, but my knights and I praised God. If we had been on watch that night, we would have perished. Later, my knights and I attacked some Turks who were loading their baggage. After we fought through the Saracen camp, we found about 6,000 Turks had abandoned their quarters. As we returned, the Turks charged us. My horse, feeling the weight, fell to his knees and I went over his head. But I got up with my shield on my arm and sword in hand. Lord Arar of Sivri, God rest his soul, came to me and said we should retreat to a ruined house and wait for the king. As we went, a great horde of Turks attacked us, knocked me down and seized my shield. Lord Arar of Sivri led me along until we reached the walls of the ruined house, where the Turks attacked us from all sides. My knights fought bravely and were praised by all the army's champions. Lord Hugh of Scots was wounded in the face. Lord Frederick of Loup was wounded between the shoulders. And Lord Arar of Sivri nearly had his nose chopped off. I prayed to St. James for help. Lord Arar said, "Sir, I'll get you help from the Count of Anjou, whom we could see in the fields." He went out, but died of his wound. He did, though, reach the Count of Anjou and begged him to help us. The Count agreed, and several sergeants spurred ahead. When the Saracens saw them coming, they left us alone. I stood there, on foot, among my wounded knights, until the king arrived with his whole battalion. Trumpets sounding and drums beating. Never did I see him so magnificently equipped. He towered head and shoulders above his followers, wearing a gilded helmet with a German sword in hand. There was no archery, only fighting with clubs and swords. Turks and our men all mixed together. One of my squires, who had fled with my banner but returned, brought me my pony. I mounted and rode up to the king, taking my place at his side. People say that day would have been the end of us all if the king hadn't been there in person. In this battle, many fought well, but then fled disgracefully over the little bridge.
couldn't persuade a single one to stand with us. I could name them, but I'll refrain since they're dead. After these battles, our real troubles began. After 9 days, the bodies of our dead rose to the water surface, floating down to the bridge that connected the two camps. The king hired 100 laborers who worked for a week removing them. The Saracen bodies were thrown to the other side of the bridge to drift downstream. Christians were buried in trenches. People searched for their friends among the dead, but I never heard of anyone being recognized. We ate no fish all during Lent, only eels that had fed on the bodies. Because of this and the unhealthy climate, we were struck with camp sickness. Our flesh withered, our skin became spotted, and swollen flesh grew on our gums. No one escaped this sickness, except through death. And when the nose began to bleed, that was when death was near. 2 weeks later, the Turks, intending to starve us, dragged their ships overland to the river, causing famine. None of our people dared come from Damietta to bring supplies. By Easter, an ox cost 80 pounds, a sheep 30 pounds, a pig 30 pounds, an egg 12 pence, and the barrel of wine 1 pound. The sickness worsened, and so much infected flesh grew on people's gums that barbers had to cut it away so they could eat. Because of my wounds, camp sickness seized me in my mouth and legs, along with fever and severe congestion. My priest, suffering the same illness, fainted during Mass, but I held him in my arms and made him finish. He never said Mass again. The King's Council and the Sultan's Council agreed to terms. Damietta would be returned to the Sultan, and the Sultan would restore Jerusalem to the king. But seeing that we would die if we stayed longer, the king ordered everyone ready for departure. At nightfall, we went aboard, and as we sailed down the river, the king was captured on land, while we were captured in the water. The mounted Saracens shot arrows at us. My people dressed me in armor, and when my sailors tried to run us ashore out of fear, I drew my sword and threatened them. Soon, 4 of the Sultan's ships approached, and I called my men to decide whether to surrender to those on land or to the ships. We agreed on the ships, as they would keep us together. One of my sailors said we should all let ourselves be killed and go to heaven. But we didn't listen to him. Seeing we would be taken, I threw my cash box, jewels, and relics into the river. A sailor told me to claim I was the king's cousin, or they'd kill us. As the first ship closed in, the Saracens jumped aboard. One tried to catch me, but one protected me, calling me the king's cousin. In my fear and sickness, I began to shake uncontrollably. I asked for water, but it poured from my nose due to a growth in my throat. My followers wept, and the Saracens asked why. They replied I had a tumor and no hope, but one of the knights said he would give me something to drink that would cure me in 2 days. And he did. On the following Sunday, the emir made us and the other prisoners land on the riverbank. While dragging my priest, Lord John, from the ship, he fainted and died and was thrown in the river. I protested that this violated the teachings of Saladin, who said you shouldn't kill a man who has shared your bread and salt. They replied these were good men for nothing, being disabled by disease. On the Thursday before Ascension Day, we came to where the pavilion was pitched and the king was brought ashore. The Sultan had arranged for Damietta to be delivered to him, and the king was to be released, but the emirs, whom the Sultan had dismissed, conspired together. A wise old Saracen said, "You see the shame and disgrace the Sultan has brought upon us. Let us have our revenge." The emir hurled Greek fire at the Sultan, setting his tower ablaze. The Sultan fled and was pursued and died. "30 men came to our ship with swords and axes. I asked Lord Baldwin, who knew Arabic, what they were saying. He said, "They've come to end us." Many confessed their sins to a monk of the Trinity Order, but I could think of none to confess. I crossed myself and knelt at the feet of a man with a Danish axe. They made us leave where we were and shut us up in the ship's hold, packed so tightly that my feet touched the face of Count Brittany and his touched mine. Eventually, the Patriarch of Jerusalem, aged 80, obtained safe passage from the Saracens and came to the king to assist him. After terms were agreed and sworn, we were to be freed on Ascension Day. But they kept us until sunset, with nothing to eat while the emirs argued. One proposed killing the king and the rich men so their young children would pose no future threat. Another, a Moroccan, opposed him, saying if we killed the king after the Sultan, it would be said the Egyptians were the most treacherous people on earth. Our deaths were nearly agreed upon, and an emir signaled to the ships. We gave ourselves up for lost, but as God pleased, it was decided at sunset that we would be freed. They insisted we eat before leaving, lest it disgrace the emirs for us to leave hungry. The food was cheese fritters cooked in the sun, and hard-boiled eggs painted in various colors. We were put ashore and went to meet the king, followed by 20,000 Saracens with swords. While staying in Acre, the king summoned his brothers and nobles and asked their advice. His mother wanted him to return to France, but he feared for his kingdom's safety. He gave them a week to decide. The papal legate told me he didn't see how the king could possibly remain, and urged me to share his ship. I said I couldn't, having lost everything. I answered that I thought the king should stay. The legate asked how the king could hold the field with so few men. I replied, "Well, sir, it's said that the king has yet to spend any of his own money, only that of the clergy. Let him spend his own money and recruit knights from abroad." Afterward, I sat beside the king at dinner, but he didn't speak a word to me, which was unlike him. Later, he placed his hands on my head and asked how I could dare advise him to stay against the council of all the great men of France. I told him, "So help me God, yes, sir." He asked if I would stay, and I said yes, somehow. The announcement of the king's decision to stay was made on the feast of St. John, days later. The king complained he had no knights in his service. I told him it was because everyone set such a high price wanting to go home. In the king's room, he asked me how much I was asking. I said £2,000 until Easter for myself and my knights. He calculated it and agreed, retaining me in his service. While the king was fortifying Caesarea, the messengers from Tartarus returned. They had traveled a full year through lands subject to the Tartars, passing cities laid waste and piles of bones. They told how the Tartars had originated in a sandy plain where nothing good grew, said to be where Gog and Magog were confined, who would come at the end of the world. The Tartar king sent a letter. "Peace is good. You cannot obtain peace except through us. Send us gold and silver each year, or we will destroy you as we have others." The king regretted never sending messengers to them. We found that the king himself had overseen the burial of the Christian dead, carrying bodies to the graves with without covering his nose while others did. He set workmen to build walls and towers and marked out quarters for everyone. I built a hut for myself and my knights, but the Count of Anjou, who was clever, made a machine to throw things into it and break our jugs and glasses. He also released a young she-bear among my chickens and killing a dozen. I managed my affairs as follows. After the king's brothers left, I had 2 chaplains, one saying mass at daybreak, the other waiting until my knights and squires had risen. My bed was positioned so no one could enter my tent without seeing me, to avoid scandal about women. When Saint Remy feast approached, I stocked up on pork, sheep, flour, and wine for winter, as prices rose in winter because the sea was rough. I bought about 100 barrels of wine, keeping the best for myself and my knights, diluting the servants' wine with water. Once, a knight was caught in a brothel. He was given a choice: be led through camp stripped to his shirt, or forfeit his horse and armor. He left them to the king and quit the camp. I begged the king to grant the horse to a poor gentleman. The king refused, saying it was still worth 80 to 100 pounds. Merchants told us the king of Tartars had taken Baghdad, capturing the caliph and putting him in an iron cage, starving him, and then tempting him with his jewels, saying, if you had spent some of this, it would have been your defense. When King Louis left the city of Sidon, which he had fortified, the patriarch and nobles told him his stay could no longer benefit the kingdom, and advised he return to France. After Easter, the king and queen boarded their ship and departed. On St. Mark's Day, the king told me he was born that day, and I replied he could say he was born again, escaping a land of danger. On the feast of St. Bartholomew, Louis, a good king, died in 1270, and his bones were buried at Saint Denis in France. Yet, there's something more I want to tell about our holy king to his honor. In a dream, I thought I saw him in front of my chapel at Swanville, joyous and light-hearted. I was happy to see him at my castle. I said, "Sir, when you leave, I'll lodge you in a house of mine at Chauville." And he answered, laughing, "By my faith, Sir Joinville, I'm in no hurry to leave this place." I want everyone to know that I have written down here a great part of the deeds of this, our holy king, seen and heard by me personally. I mention this so those who hear this book may firmly believe what it says, which I have truly seen and heard. This was written in the year of grace 1309, in the month of October.
Inside the medieval apothecary shop, dried herbs hung from weathered ceiling beams in neat bundles. A fire crackled beneath bubbling copper pots, filling the air with the sweet scent of healing brews. The apothecary worked methodically in the dim light, grinding leaves with his mortar and pestle, while checking each jar's contents against his inventory list. Rain pelted the leaded glass windows as evening settled over the town. He paused his work, listening to the steady drumming. The storm had grown fierce enough to drive most townspeople indoors, leaving the narrow streets empty, save for the occasional hurried vicar rushing past his shop. The shelves around him held countless glass vials, each labeled in his careful hand. Some contained common remedies: feverfew, chamomile, willow bark, while others held rarer substances, their contents gleaming mysteriously in the firelight. A collection of surgical tools lay clean and ready on a worn wooden table, their polished surfaces reflecting the warm glow of fat burning lamps. It was then that the door burst open with a gust of wind and rain. A knight staggered in, one hand pressed onto their side, the other steadying themselves against the doorframe. Water dripped from their armor onto the stone floor. "I require treatment," the knight said, voice muffled by their helmet. Despite the obvious pain, they remained rigidly upright. The apothecary moved quickly to examine the wound. need to remove some armor. The cut needs proper cleaning. No. The knight stepped back. Bind it as it is. I cannot remove the armor. That will lead to infection. At least let me. Just bind it. The knight insisted, tension clear in their voice. I can pay well. The apothecary frowned, but gathered his supplies. As he approached with clean bandages, he noticed the quality of the armor. Fine steel worked with subtle details that marked royal craftsmanship. Yet, there were no identifying marks or heraldry. An unusual combination that raised questions he knew better than to ask. Thunder rolled overhead as he began his work, the night remaining silent and still beneath his hands. The wound was deep, but clean, made by a sharp blade rather than a ragged weapon. Another detail that didn't match the typical tavern brawl or bandit attack. But that, too, he kept to himself. He worked carefully in the flickering light, cleaning what he could reach of the wound through gaps in the armor. The knight's breathing was measured but strained, each small movement carefully controlled. Despite their rigid posture, he could sense their growing weakness. Whatever had caused this wound, the knight was far from safety, and refusing proper treatment would only worsen their condition. As he reached for more bandages, a flash of lightning illuminated the shop. In that brief moment, he caught a glimpse of something that made him pause. A subtle pattern etched into the armor's shoulder plate. One he'd definitely seen before in the royal court's guard. But before he could process this detail, thunder crashed overhead, and the knight swayed slightly, their composed facade beginning to crack. The apothecary bent closer to examine the wound, frowning as he noticed an unusual purple tinge at its edges. His fingers froze. He knew that color. A telltale sign of nightshade-based poison, the kind used exclusively by royal assassins. The wound is poisoned, he said quietly, straightening up. You need the armor off. Now. The knight stiffened. Impossible. Just bind it, and He'll be dead by dawn. He moved to his shelves, quickly gathering ingredients. The poison's already spreading. See how your fingers tremble? The knight looked down at their gauntleted hand, now visibly shaking. You're certain? Purple-tipped nightshade. Royal court poison. I've seen it before. He began grinding herbs with swift, practiced movements. It'll reach your heart within hours, without treatment. Thunder crashed outside as the night seemed to wage an internal battle. Finally, they spoke, voice weaker than before. You cannot tell anyone what you see. I take confidences seriously, but we're wasting time. The knight struggled with the armor clasps, movements growing clumsy. The apothecary stepped forward to help, carefully removing the chest plate. The wound beneath was worse than he thought. Purple veins spreading outward like dark lightning. The helmet, he insisted, mixing herbs into a paste. The poison will affect your mind soon. I will need to check your eyes for... The knight swayed suddenly, catching themselves against a table. Vials rattled. No, I cannot. You can, and you must. He stepped closer, voice firm. Now. With trembling hands, the knight reached for their helmet. There was a moment of hesitation. Then they lifted it away. Long dark hair fell free, framing a face the apothecary had never thought to see again. Despite the years between then and now, he knew those eyes immediately. The princess held his gaze, chin lifted despite her obvious weakness. "Hello, Thomas," she said softly. He stared, words failing him. The girl he'd loved in secret, the princess who'd been his childhood friend until duty separated them. She stood before him now, poisoned and in disguise. "Your Highness," he managed finally, healer's instincts warring with shock. I... She stumbled then, poison taking its toll. He caught her automatically. Years of formality forgotten in urgency. She felt smaller without the armor, more like the girl he remembered. "Well," she said, attempting a weak smile, "this isn't quite how I imagined seeing you again." The poison's purple traces were spreading visibly now. Dark veins creeping up her neck. Her skin had taken on a grayish tinge, and her breathing grew more labored. Thomas pushed aside his shock and confusion, forcing himself to focus on the immediate threat. "We must act quickly," he said, guiding her to a chair. "The poison is spreading faster than I feared." He turned back to his workbench, hands moving swiftly among his supplies. "I need to know exactly when you were wounded." I think 2 hours ago," she managed, gripping the chair's arms as another wave of dizziness hit. 2 hours ago, just outside the city's walls. Thomas calculated quickly.
2 hours. The poison would reach her heart by dawn. Less time than he'd hoped, but enough if they worked quickly. He refused to consider the alternative. Not when he just found her again. Even under these impossible circumstances. Stay with me, he urged, reaching for his strongest antidote herbs. We have work to do. Thomas worked quickly at his bench, crushing herbs with shaking hands as he tried to process the reality before him. The Princess Elizabeth sat watching him, her beautiful face growing paler by the minute. I need to know what really happened, he said, keeping his voice steady. Still direct as ever. She managed a weak laugh that turned into a cough. Some things haven't changed. Many things have changed, Your Highness. He emphasized the title slightly, measuring dried foxglove with careful precision. Don't. She gripped the chair tighter as another wave of dizziness hit. Please, don't call me that. Not here. Not now. He added the foxglove to his mortar, grinding it perhaps harder than necessary. What should I call you then? The knight who burst into my shop? The princess who vanished from court without a word? The girl who... He stopped himself, focusing on the herbs. The girl who broke your heart. Her voice was quiet. We need to focus on the poison, he said firmly, though his hand had stilled. I am seeing signs of nightshade, but there's something else. Something that's making it spread faster. She nodded, professional despite her growing weakness. Monkshood, probably. They've been experimenting with combinations. They? Who exactly is trying to kill you, Elizabeth? She met his gaze, and for a moment he saw past the years of separation to the girl who used to sneak out of the castle gardens to meet him. Members of my court, my own court. I've been investigating corruption, getting too close to the truth, apparently. Thomas turned back to his workbench, adding ingredients to a copper pot, heating over the fire. The familiar motions helped steady him. That explains the disguise. No, I never thought I'd see you in armor. You'd be surprised what I've learned to do. She watched him work, eyes growing unfocused. I needed to become more than just a princess in a tower. And now, you're a poisoned knight in an apothecary shop. He stirred the mixture, trying to keep his tone light despite his growing concern. The poison was now spreading faster. At least, she said softly, at least it brought me back to you. He nearly dropped his spoon, but before he could respond, she slumped forward, consciousness finally giving way to the poison's effects. Thomas caught her just before she hit the floor, his heart racing with both old feelings and new fear. The antidote wasn't ready, and time was running out. You need to stay awake, Thomas said, supporting Elizabeth as she stirred back to consciousness. The antidote requires multiple stages, and I need your help. She blinked, forcing her eyes to focus. Then tell me what to do. He helped her to the workbench, keeping one arm around her waist as she swayed. First, we need to counteract the nightshade. Then, the monk's hood. But something's making them work together unusually well. As he worked, combining ingredients with swift precision, Elizabeth watched his hands. You were always good at this. Even in the castle gardens, you knew every plant's purpose. The poison's affecting your mind, he said quietly. It's making you speak thoughts you'd usually keep hidden. Truth serum, she managed, a weak laugh. Of course. They are clever. She gripped the bench as another wave of dizziness hit. Though, perhaps not as clever as they think. Thomas added crushed belladonna berries to his mixture, trying to focus on the task rather than her words. This first stage needs to simmer for exactly 7 minutes. Count with me. It'll help keep you alert. Remember how we used to count stars in the garden? The words tumbled out before she could stop them. Every night, until they called me back inside. He kept stirring, jaw tight. Elizabeth, I kept every letter you sent me, she continued, the truth serum loosening her tongue. Even after I had to stop replying. Father's orders, of course. A princess couldn't be seen corresponding with a commoner. His voice was sharp, but his hands remained steady as he measured out the next ingredients. With anyone me happy. She reached for a jar he needed. They were afraid I'd choose differently. Choose you. The mixture bubbled, giving off purple steam. Thomas added powdered herbs, counting under his breath. You made your choice clear enough. Did I? Her voice crackled. Or did I just do what was expected? What they told me would keep you safe. He paused, looking at her properly for the first time since the revelation. Keep me safe. They threatened to have you removed from the city permanently. The truth spilled out like water. I couldn't be the reason. Thomas's hands stilled on the mortar. So you pushed me away instead. It seemed kinder than having you killed. She smiled bitterly. Though watching you leave nearly killed me anyway. The mixture turned a dangerous red. Thomas quickly added more herbs, forcing himself to focus. The monk's hood is reaching your heart. We need to work faster. She nodded, then stumbled. He caught her again, and for a moment, they were too close. Years of separation evaporating in shared breath. I never stopped, she whispered, the truth serum pulling words from her heart. Loving you, I mean. Thomas's hands tightened on her arms. Elizabeth, the poison is making me honest. Finally. She met his gaze steadily despite her weakness. Every time I heard news of your success, your healing work, I was so proud and so lonely. He helped her back to her chair, movements gentle despite his turmoil. We need to focus on saving your life. The past is right here. She interrupted. In this shop, with both of us finally speaking truth. The antidote bubbled, demanding attention. Thomas returned to his work, adding the final ingredients with trembling hands. If you survive this, what then? You're still a princess. I'm still the man I should have fought for. Her voice was growing weaker, but her words remained clear. Perhaps that's why I'm here. The poison brought me back to you. But the truth serum, that's showing me what I need to do next. The antidote turned a clear, bright blue. Thomas lifted it from the fire, heart pounding with more than just urgency. It's ready. But Elizabeth, the things you're saying are what I've wanted to say for years. She reached for the antidote with shaken hands. Now, are you going to help me live long enough to prove it? The final stage is complicated, Thomas said, holding the bright blue antidote. It requires blood from both of us, a binding agent. Elizabeth's eyes widened slightly. You mean blood magic? I wouldn't have thought you'd. I learned many things. After leaving, he replied, preparing a small knife. Some less orthodox than others. The candlelight cast dancing shadows as he carefully cut his palm, letting drops fall into the antidote. liquid hissed and darkened. "Your turn," he said softly, offering her the knife. Their fingers brushed as she took it. "The truth serum's getting stronger," she warned. "Whatever I say next, then perhaps we should work quickly." But he didn't move away as she made her cut. Their blood mixing in the potion. The antidote began to glow, casting their faces in ethereal light. "There are positions," she said suddenly, words rushing out. "At court, a royal physician is needed. Someone trusted. Someone who could work closely with the princess." Thomas still. "Elizabeth, I've watched you build this." She gestured at his shop. "Your independence, your reputation. I know what I'm asking you to give up. Do you?" His voice was rough. "Last time I was at court was different. I was different." She gripped his arm, leaving a small, bloody handprint. "I'm not that scared girl anymore. I'm offering you a choice this time, not taking it away." The antidote pulsed between them, growing brighter. "And what of your court conspirators?" "They'll be dealt with. But I need..." She swayed slightly, poison still coursing through her. "I need someone I can trust. Someone who knows both medicine and truth." Thomas looked at their mixed blood in the glowing potion. Years of longing, warring with hard-earned wisdom. "The court nearly destroyed us once. Then help me change it." Her eyes were bright. "Not just as my physician, as my partner, The word hung unspoken between them as Thomas lifted the antidote. first. Live. Then we'll discuss terms. She took the vial with trembling hands. I mean every word. Poison or no poison. I know, he said softly. That's what terrifies me. The antidote glowed brighter as she drank. Their mingled blood carrying healing through her veins. The purple traces of poison began to fade from her skin. But the truth serum's effects intensified. I dream of you, she confessed, words spilling out. Dreams of what could have been, of what still could be. Thomas turned away, checking her pulse. Professional mask slipping. Elizabeth, please. No, listen. She caught his hand. Their blood still mingling. I'm offering you more than a position. I'm offering you a way to stay. To be near me without suspicion. To help me make real change. And if I refuse, then I'll respect your choice. But know this. I'm not leaving your life again. Position or no position. I'll find ways to see you, to work with you, to... He pressed a finger to her lips, stopping the flow of truth. The antidote needs time to work. Rest. But she gripped his wrist, moving his hand away. No more waiting. No more silence. The poison brought me here. But this truth serum is making me brave. I love you, Thomas. Still. Always. And I'm tired of pretending duty means denying my heart. Thunder crashed outside as Thomas struggled with her words, with the reality of this moment. A princess he'd loved and lost, now offering him everything he'd ever dreamed of. But at what cost? Your life at the court, he began carefully. Your responsibilities will be easier with someone I trust at my side. She touched his face, her hand still bearing traces of their mingled blood. Someone who knows both healing and truth. Someone who can help me transform the court instead of being transformed by it. The antidote's glow was fading, but something else was growing stronger between them. Something that had survived years of separation, duty, and denial. Dawn comes soon, he said finally. The antidote will need watching through the night. She smiled, reading acceptance in his words. Then we have hours yet to plan our future. The storm raged outside, but inside the shop, truth and healing worked their magic as two hearts once torn apart found their way back to each other. Thomas hovered beside Elizabeth, watching the slow return of color to her cheeks. The antidote had finally purged the poison from her system. She breathed more easily now, though an exhausted tremor still ran through her limbs. That was close, he murmured, pressing the back of his hand to her forehead. The feverish heat had receded, leaving her skin cool and clammy. Another hour, and I might have been too late. She managed a small, wry smile. Then I owe you my life, again. He shook his head. You should rest. But even as she tried to lean back, her eyes darted around the apothecary, settling on her discarded armor. I can't stay here. My enemies will think they've won if I don't return to court. Thomas exhaled. You nearly died tonight. Give yourself time. She pushed herself upright. Time is exactly what I don't have. There's corruption in the palace. People who'd stop at nothing to see me out of the picture for good. If I'm gone too long, they'll move unopposed. Her gaze flicked to him. That's why I need you. He looked away, torn. I left to avoid these very intrigues. You know that better than anyone. I do, she said softly. Finally, Thomas reached for her hand. If you return to court, you'll be in danger every moment. I'm in danger wherever I go. She met his eyes, determination etched on her face. All I can do is meet it head on, with help from someone I trust. The words set his heart pounding. What exactly do you want me to do? I'm offering you royal physician. I trust no one else with my health or the kingdom's. Thomas let out a long breath. The memory of the council's cold marble halls tightened his chest. That's a big step. You know how they'll talk if you bring me back. Then let them talk. The only thing I care about is whether you'll accept. He thought of the early years, when they were barely more than children, roaming the palace gardens, when he shouldn't have even been there. But he couldn't lose her again. Not like this. I'll do it. If it means I can keep you alive, and maybe root out the source of these attacks. I'll return to court. She squeezed his hand, a spark of that old warmth flaring between them. Thank you. I promise. This time, it'll be different. He helped her to her feet, and she tested her balance. The deep cut still twinged, but she stood taller with each breath, pressing one hand against fresh bandages. We need a plan. My father will demand answers about this wound. Thomas bent to retrieve her breastplate, carefully setting it on a table. We'll say you were ambushed outside the city walls. That's not far from the truth. As for the rest, we'll keep our findings to ourselves until we know who's behind the poison. She nodded, taking a measured step forward. Yes, we'll move quietly. Together. A faint pink light from the rising sun crept through the apothecary windows, illuminating the worn stone floor. The storm had blown over, leaving a hushed calm in its wake. Outside, a new day beckoned. Elizabeth met Thomas's gaze, and For a moment, they were neither princess nor apothecary, but two souls who drifted apart and now stood on the brink of something new. She lifted her chin. "Shall we?" Thomas paused, letting the old fears and new hopes settle in his chest. Then he offered her a soft, resolute smile, the kind he once gave her as a boy. "Lead the way, Your Highness." And side by side, they stepped out into the dawn. Despite the challenges awaiting them, palace conspiracies, suspicious courtiers, and the burden of old wounds, they carried a shared resolve to face it all together. For the first time in years, Thomas felt not only the pull of duty, but the promise of what might be if they dared to claim it.